So that's how fast it's going now. And the backside of this is that Hollywood gets a bigger dominance because all of their films are already digital, and most of the 3D films also come from Hollywood. So you can already see an increase in Hollywood revenue and a decrease in European film revenue in Europe, for instance. At the moment in Europe, 30% of the screens are digital, and that has doubled in just 1 year. And the next year there will be 50% of all screens digital in Europe. And of course this means that distributors have no will or interest whatsoever in making expensive 35mm prints anymore. This is just a diagram on the growth, and you see from 2007, 2008, it's going steeply upwards, really, really, really quickly. And somewhere along that line is, of course, Avatar that really changed a lot of things. This is the digital, thank you, the penetration of digital screens in Europe. And as you see for the UK and France, there are really, really a lot of screens digital already. And for instance, in Norway, which I will speak about more later, all of the cinemas are 2K and 3D today, all of them. So, what about the national policies in Europe? The way Europe treats digital cinema is quite different in different countries. And I've chosen to speak about, in more in-depth, about some countries where they have some interesting support scheme from the government. And you can say that the main driving force for many governments in Europe is to ensure the cinema infrastructure that is maintaining all cinemas alive, and also the cultural diversity. So it will not only be Hollywood content, but that there will be more and different types of films. So many governments are indeed concerned about the independent sector outside of the big city multiplexes. Actually, 64% of all cinemas in Europe have 3 screens or less. So it's a lot of them out there. And the virtual print fee model will not be suitable for all independent cinemas, because you have to have a certain amount of screenings, a certain amount of revenue to be able to be part of the VPF scheme. And also, personally, I am very critical to the VPF system for another reason. And that is, of course, that most of the money will come from big Hollywood distributors. And they will think that they actually own the equipment, indirectly own the equipment, which means that they can say, no, I don't want you to put up any film classics, because I want this space, this time for my big blockbusters. And especially, and we know this as a fact, if you want to do live alternative content, it's out of the question in many of the VPF cinemas. So that is a major concern. If you want to develop your cinema, you want to have local films, maybe made in your region, then you should be able to program any way you like it yourself, and not have Disney or Fox saying what you should or shouldn't program. I think that's a very important lesson in terms of VPF. So if you want VPF, you have to be able to maintain the liberty of your cinema. And of course, there needs to be national support systems all over Europe, and I think also in Latin America. Some of the concerns are, of course, how will we be able to secure the financing so no cinemas will have to close down? I don't think it will be possible. I think we will see some cinema death all over the world. There are other tricky questions. One is the competition authorities in Europe. They dislike the supports if it only goes to small cinemas or art house cinemas, because they feel that's an advantage for these cinemas if the multiplexes can't use the same support system. So that's under big scrutiny right now in Europe. The other is the major exhibitors who are fighting the support system, because I'm sorry if I'm being controversial here, but they have an interest in small cinemas dying. They actually want the audience to come to their cinemas. At least that's the case for Sweden. I know I sound very crass here, but we have a situation like that in Sweden. Because the multiplexes feel that, well, isn't it enough? I have 20 screens. Come to my screens. That's perfectly enough. And as I said, I'm also here representing Europa Cinemas, and I want to do a few slides from a speech that Clodovic Poirot did the other day for the European Parliament. And Clodovic is the General Director of Europa Cinemas, and I totally agree with his viewpoints on this. So Europa Cinemas is an organization. I don't know if you know much about it, but the bottom line is it wants to maintain the diversity of European cinema. It's going to be brought closer to European audiences via 2,000 screens in the Europa Cinemas network. So to be able to be part of Europa Cinemas, you have to screen a certain percentage of European non-national films in your local cinema. 400 out of 815 screens, or theaters in Europe, Europa Cinemas are digital today, with VPF financing. So it actually works for them. And that means about 30% of the cinemas in Europa Cinemas network. So the main points of digitization, according to Europa Cinemas, is the necessity of digitization, as we have talked about already today. That it's rapidly replacing 35mm. It's high quality and no degradation of quality, as you know. There are no scratches in a 35 or in a digital print. 3D cinema is interesting from a commercial point of view, but many art house cinemas and movie fans have said that, well, this is just for kids' movies and science fiction whatsoever. But now the art house directors are really starting to look at 3D as an artistic means of expression. So, Wim Wenders made this documentary about Pina Bausch, Pina, in 3D. Werner Herzog just did a documentary about cave exploring. Jean-Luc Godard is making his next film in 3D. And I just read on the airplane here that Martin Scorsese is making his next film in 3D. And it's about Georges Méliès. I think it's wonderful. One of the big inventors of fantasy cinema and early inventors of cinema will now be in 3D. Digital also means, of course, an end of transportation, of storing 35mm prints, of carrying them around, and also mounting and dismounting the film reels. It also makes very good use of the flexibility. You can have a number of films in your server, and you can actually reprogram your schedule every day, depending on the interest from the audience, and have a lot of different films without having actually a physical copy of the film in your venue. You will be able to enlarge your offers through cultural contents like live performances, and also alternative content in 3D, which is also very quickly being developed all over the world. And of course, the audience is very demanding in terms of the quality, because now at home, many people are starting to get, at least in Europe, flat screens, surround sound, HD, even 3D. So you have to match that and even surpass that in the digital cinema. It's very urgent to get digital equipment today, because especially as we heard before about the development in the US, also Europe and China. And now it's the norm in most of the multiplexes, and they are sort of leading the gang. And the distributors, of course, have an interest in getting DCPs as quickly as possible, so they won't have to be forced to make more 35mm prints. And so the rest of the world really has to catch up to the USA, so they will not have a bigger dominance than they have today. And as I said before, the 35mm cinemas really risk getting behind. So the whole industry is looking to accelerate the transition, and well, the latecomers will be heavily punished and risk finding themselves sidelined. We also have to look at the inequality which is faced by some of the cinemas because they won't be able to afford the equipment. As I said, the DPF deals might be for the big cinemas. Small markets and small cinemas means a tougher time getting DPF deals because they don't have enough circulation to finance the equipment. There's no private capital to finance the equipment. And so the European and national and regional funds really have to step in to help out financially. So there's an urgency and necessity of helping these cinemas digitize so that they may continue their cultural and social mission. Some countries do have support measures, and others have some sort of measures, but not for everyone. But today the measures are insufficient and very unequally distributed within Europe. On the EU level, on the European level, Europa Cinemas has its own funding system for digital projection, and that's a maximum of 5,000 euros per year for single screen cinemas, and 10,000 euros per year for multiple screens. And this is the maximum amount of money you can get during 5 years. It's a total of 20,000 euros, so it's maybe 1/3 of the investment. The media program is just now launching the Go Digital scheme, which will have a funding of 2 million euros per year, which is not very much in the big picture. We also have the European Regional Development Fund. We have something called LEADER, which is an EU project, which some cinemas are using now in Sweden. And we also have the benefit of getting money from the EU structural funds. Well, the benefits of digital cinema then, as I said, it's not just maintaining the status quo, but you can have a more diversified repertoire with films from all over the world, different types of films. You will get quick access to new films, which is not the case in small towns in rural areas. And also being able to reach the young audiences. Many of the young kids are sort of turning their back to cinema, going home, watching home video or video games or whatever. So this is one way of getting them back into the cinemas. And of course, from a Europa Cinemas perspective, you can get more European films under better conditions. And digital makes cinema more attractive as a whole. And it will help European cinemas reach larger audiences. And of course, with the digital development in promotion, using the internet, using newsletters, using social media, this is very well fitting in with that development. So Clodovic's final words from his speech, and I really like this.